Good evening, my friends. Forget everything you've ever seen in the movies. Tonight, I'm not simply inviting you to talk about the Middle Ages. Tonight, I'm inviting you to move into a castle. Picture this. You're standing beside a massive stone wall, so cold and damp that it feels as if the rock itself is breathing against your skin. Somewhere above you, a raven croaks. From the inner courtyard drift the smells of wet straw, smoke, and horses. You hear the rhythmic clang of metal, an armorer repairing someone's gear, a kitchen boy cursing after burning his hand, and far off, the bleating of sheep being driven toward their pens. And all of this is an ordinary morning. A real medieval castle looks nothing like the ones we know from films. There are no sweeping carpets, no sparkling halls, no glowing chandeliers. A castle is not a home. A castle is a machine. A heavy, complex machine designed for one purpose: to survive. And tonight, we won't look at it from the outside. We will go inside. We'll feel the damp air of narrow corridors, climb a spiral staircase that is itself a weapon, wait in line for a bowl of coarse stew, step into the solar of the lady of the castle and see how beauty could kill. Sit at a feast where bread is your plate and a peacock serves as a firework. Witness the Lord dispensing justice over bad ale, and in the end, climb the battlements as an enemy army appears on the horizon. Tonight, we are going to unlearn the myths we carry about the Middle Ages and understand what life behind these walls truly felt like for the people who lived, worked, feared, fought, and breathed inside them. Welcome to the castle. When you first approach a real medieval castle, you realize something important. It does not want you to come closer. A castle was not built for beauty, comfort, or romance. It was built for one purpose only: to endure. From a distance, it looks monumental, almost majestic. But the closer you get, the more obvious its true nature becomes. This is not a palace. This is a weapon. Every feature of a castle is designed with brutal logic. The walls angle outward, so arrows slide off them. Arrow slits provide defenders with vision, while giving attackers almost nothing. The gate is not simply a pair of doors. It is a multi-layered construct of oak, iron, and sand that absorbs the force of rams. Towers are positioned to create overlapping fields of fire over anyone approaching the entrance. But once you step inside, the first sensation that hits you is the tightness of the space. Real castles were far more compact than films suggest. Yes, they had a great hall, the most spacious room in the entire fortress, but even it was dark, smoky, cold, and used for everything: eating, sleeping, working, holding court. Beyond the hall, the castle becomes narrow, low, and tactical. Corridors twist at odd angles. Stairways force you to turn where you don't expect. Rooms are built not for comfort, but for control. And then comes the spiral staircase. As you climb it, you notice that something feels wrong. Your steps are uneven. The walls press in on you. Your rhythm breaks. That is not an accident. Almost all medieval spiral staircases turned clockwise. Most people are right-handed. An attacker climbing the staircase with a sword in his right hand would find his arm blocked by the central column. He could not swing properly. But the defender, standing above him, has full freedom of movement and the advantage of the higher step. The staircase itself becomes a weapon. Castle builders went even further. Steps were often uneven in height. The people who lived in the castle knew the rhythm by heart, like musicians who know the tempo of a melody. But an enemy rushing in during an attack would stumble, lose balance, fall. Castle architecture was passive-aggressive. It punished intruders and protected its own. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that the castle is a living organism. The keep is its heart and mind, the most fortified refuge. The narrow corridors are its veins carrying life, servants, soldiers, children, messengers. The courtyard is its lungs, where the daily work breathes, armor repaired, animals tended, clothes dried, commands shouted. The guards are its nervous system, constantly aware, constantly alert. A medieval castle was never meant to be comfortable. In that world, comfort was a luxury one simply could not afford. A castle had to be hard, cunning, resilient. It had to be capable of surviving famine, siege, fire, betrayal, and war. A castle is a character. It has its own personality, its own logic, its own harsh habits. It protects those who belong to it and breaks those who don't. And now that we've met this stone creature and felt the way it breathes, it's time to move to the people who bring it to life, the men and women whose fears, duties, and hopes filled these walls with meaning. If the castle is a living organism, then its life depends not on its walls, but on the people who inhabit it. And the first myth we must destroy is the myth of the all-powerful lord who sits comfortably by the fire, sipping wine and majestically ruling over everything. In reality, the lord is almost always away. A medieval nobleman is a man of the road. He spends more time in the saddle than at home. Wars, councils, royal courts, land inspections, negotiations, visits to allies, travel between estates. The lord is a politician, a military leader, a diplomat, and a tax inspector, all at once. And most of the time, he's absent. But the castle cannot wait for his return. The castle must function. It must feed dozens or even hundreds of people, maintain discipline, manage resources, resolve disputes, keep the economy running, ensure safety. And this is where a figure appears, almost invisible in films, but absolutely central in real life, the lady of the castle. A medieval lady is the general manager, the chief financial officer, the personnel director, the legal authority, and the crisis manager, all rolled into one. If the lord is the face of power, the lady is its brain. She oversees not only the household, but the entire economic machinery of the castle. She is respected, she is feared, and she is obeyed. She knows exactly how much grain is left in the granary. She decides how much salt can be used this month. She controls the quality of the flour, chooses who guards the storerooms, who works, who rests, and who must be punished. Her decisions determine whether there will be enough food to last the winter. She manages the finances, keeps the accounts, approves expenditures, negotiates with merchants, and oversees the estate's income. Every mistake she might make could cost people their lives. The lady also holds judicial authority. Yes, medieval law gives her real legal power. In the manorial system, peasants and villagers bring their complaints, land disputes, debts, quarrels, and accusations directly to her. She judges them as the Lord would, and her decisions carry the same weight. On her belt hang keys, the actual keys to the castle. They are not decorations, they are power. Whoever holds the keys controls the fortress. But perhaps the most surprising part is her education. A medieval lady was often more educated than her husband. She could read and write in Latin, maintain correspondence with monasteries, neighboring estates, and royal officials. She understood basic law, managed accounts, calculated taxes, negotiated prices for grain, livestock, and metal. She knew enough medicine to treat the garrison, the servants, and her own family. She managed people, money, land, conflicts, and safety. This is not a romantic figure gazing wistfully out of a window. This is a highly competent administrator. Imagine a royal inspector arriving to check the state of the estate. Whom does he ask to see first? Not the Lord, the lady. She knows everything. She tells the truth. She holds the castle together. The Lord leads the war. The lady leads the castle. A medieval lady is the general manager, the chief financial officer, the personnel director, the legal authority, and the crisis manager all rolled into one. If the Lord is the face of power, the lady is its brain. She oversees not only the household, but the entire economic machinery of the castle. She is respected, she is feared, and she is obeyed. She knows exactly how much grain is left in the granary. She decides how much salt can be used this month. She controls the quality of the flour, chooses who guards the storerooms, who works, who rests, and who must be punished. Her decisions determine whether there will be enough food to last the winter. She manages the finances, keeps the accounts, approves expenditures, negotiates with merchants, and oversees the estate's income. Every mistake she might make could cost people their lives. The lady also holds judicial authority. Yes, medieval law gives her real legal power. In the manorial system, peasants and villagers bring their complaints, land disputes, debts, quarrels, and accusations directly to her. She judges them as the Lord would, and her decisions carry the same weight. On her belt hang keys, the actual keys to the castle. They are not decorations, they are power. Whoever holds the keys controls the fortress. But perhaps the most surprising part is her education. A medieval lady was often more educated than her husband. She could read and write in Latin, maintain correspondence with monasteries, neighboring estates, and royal officials. She understood basic law, managed accounts, calculated taxes, negotiated prices for grain, livestock, and metal. She knew enough medicine to treat the garrison, the servants, and her own family. She managed people, money, land, conflicts, and safety. This is not a romantic figure gazing wistfully out of a window. This is a highly competent administrator. Imagine a royal inspector arriving to check the state of the estate. Whom does he ask to see first? Not the Lord, the lady. She knows everything. She tells the truth. She holds the castle together. The Lord leads the war. The lady leads the castle. She knows every person who lives within the walls, who is lazy, who works hard, who is sick, who is planning to marry, who lost livestock, who has a drinking problem, who is stirring trouble. The castle is an enormous machine, and all of its gears turn because the lady makes them turn. And most importantly, she is not allowed to make mistakes. In the Middle Ages, miscalculating supplies means famine. Losing control of discipline means rebellion. Being too lenient means weakness. Mismanaging money means ruin. So the lady is not an ornament of the castle. She is its operational core, the intelligence center without which the fortress becomes an empty shell. And when we speak of the medieval castle as a living organism, we must remember, if the keep is its heart, then the lady is its mind. She sees everything, knows everything, controls everything. And it is thanks to her that the castle breathes, even on the days when alarm bells ring and everyone senses that hard times are coming. Morning in a medieval castle does not begin with the sunrise. It begins with a sound. Somewhere below your feet, in the stone belly of the kitchen, comes the first thud of a log being dropped into the hearth. A dull strike, then another, then the sharp clap of an iron door, and a muffled curse from an apprentice cook who has burned his hand. The castle wakes the way a machine wakes, not all at once, but piece by piece. First the kitchen, then the stables, then the guards, and only then everyone else. The sun is still far below the horizon, but shadows are already moving through the lower corridors. These are the servants. Their day begins earlier than any other, and not because they want it to, because they must. Imagine a young servant sleeping not in a bed, but on hard straw in a dark common room, where the only heat comes from a weak hearth. He does not wake by choice, he's shaken awake by duty. He has cold water to carry from the courtyard well, a well crusted with frost in winter. He has fireplaces to clean, ash to shovel out, firewood to stack, flames to coax to life. He has hallways to sweep, cold, damp, smelling of stone, smoke, and the fatigue of the night. His world is an unending chain of staircases and heavy loads, up, down, up again. Water to carry, clothes to deliver, kitchens to assist, floors to scrub, animals to tend. He is the bloodstream of the castle, endlessly circulating. If he stops, the whole system stops with him. A little later, the squire awakens. He is younger than the knight, but his life is no easier. His first task is to check the armor. He must lay out the leather straps, tighten the buckles, dry and oil the chainmail, make sure the scabbard hasn't absorbed moisture. Then the horse, because the horse is half of the knight, sometimes more. It must be fed, brushed, groomed, and its hoofs inspected. And all of this must be done before the knight himself even appears. When the knight steps out, everything must already be perfect. A knight wakes without luxury. Forget soft beds and gentle morning rituals from films. His morning begins with pain, real physical pain. Yesterday was a training day, so was the day before that, and the day before that. A knight has no weekends, no holidays. The medieval world demands constant readiness. He rises, and the first thing he feels is the weight of his own body. Legs sore, shoulders aching, his back reminding him of yesterday's strikes. In front of him is a simple wooden basin filled with cold water. He washes quickly, with no comfort. His morning is preparation for battle, even if no battle comes today. When the squire hands him his sword, the grip feels heavy but familiar. The knight steps into the courtyard. It smells of damp earth, horse manure, and smoke from the kitchen. In the dim morning light, the guards are changing shifts, and then the first strike of the sword. Training begins. Wooden swords for warm-up, iron ones to feel the true weight, targets, shields, footwork, or mounted exercises if space allows. This happens every day, not for sport, but for survival. Today may be ordinary. Tomorrow may bring an alarm bell, a fleeing messenger, an attack. Only after the servants have worked 2 hours and the knight has already sweated through his tunic does the Lord awaken. His morning is the quietest but the heaviest, because the Lord is not just the owner of the castle. He is a politician, a judge, a commander, a tax officer, and the emotional center of everyone who lives inside these walls. He is woken gently. Cold water for washing is already prepared. His chamber is among the warmest, but even here the drafts creep under the door. While he washes, the steward enters with a basket of scrolls and account books. There are so many that it seems the castle runs on parchment as much as on grain. The Lord learns how much grain remains in the granary, how much meat has spoiled, who complained yesterday, who broke the rules, who seeks aid, which taxes have been collected, which still must be, who entered the castle gates last night, which messages arrived from neighboring lords or from the monastery or from the king's officers. The Lord never rests. His life is an endless river of decisions, and each decision affects dozens of lives: servants, peasants, knights, merchants, craftsmen. By late morning, the castle hums at full strength. In the courtyard, life boils. Servants dash with buckets and bundles. The knight finishes his drills. The blacksmith breathes life into his furnace. Apprentice cooks carry water. Stable boys clean the stalls. Children, always waking later, help their mothers gather firewood or carry baskets. The noise swells until the whole castle seems to vibrate. It is alive, working as a multi-layered machine in which every person is a gear and every gear must turn. But the most interesting moment arrives at midday, because midday is when all these worlds converge. Servants, soldiers, knights, administrators, children, cooks, stable boys. Everyone begins preparing for the meal. In a castle, a meal is never just food. It is synchronization, the moment when the machine breathes in unison. It is the proof that the day is unfolding as it should. This is one morning in a medieval castle, but it is only half the day. Ahead lies the kitchen, hot, smoky, chaotic. Ahead lies the food eaten without forks. Ahead lies the great hall, where decisions are made, where justice is handed down, where alliances are formed. Ahead lies the evening, closing with the smell of smoke, the scrape of boots, and a silence so thick it feels like the castle is preparing for the night the same way it prepares for war. And now that we have lived through the castle's morning, we can finally descend into the hottest place in the entire fortress, the place where life begins and ends every day: the kitchen. If the great hall is the castle's face, then the kitchen is its beating, sweating, roaring heart. It is here, in the heat and smoke, that the real work of survival takes place. The kitchen of a medieval castle is not the tidy, polished space shown in period dramas. It is chaos. Organized chaos, yes, but chaos all the same. Imagine stepping into a vast stone room whose walls long ago turned black from soot. The air is thick and heavy. A massive hearth burns constantly at the center, with flames licking the bottoms of iron cauldrons suspended on chains from heavy wooden beams. Some cauldrons hold porridge, thick barley or oats, others simmer with meat or vegetables, while a third may hold nothing but boiling water that will soon be used for cooking, washing, or scalding. The smells hit you like a wave. Smoke from damp firewood, the sharp tang of burning fat, the earthy scent of old root vegetables, the faint sourness of yesterday's ale, the musty smell of wet cloths drying near the fire. This mixture is so dense you feel it settling on your skin, clinging to your clothes, filling your lungs. And then you notice the people. Here work the castle's invisible workforce, the kitchen boys who drag wood, haul water, and scrub pots, the scullions at the very bottom of the hierarchy, whose hands are cracked and raw from sand-scrubbing greasy iron cauldrons, the women who sweat over open flames, stirring endlessly, slicing endlessly, shouting endlessly. Everyone moves quickly. Everyone is tired, but no one can stop for a moment because the castle cannot stop either. There is no soap, water is cold, the pots are enormous, heavy, and permanently greasy. To clean them, sand is used as a scourer, scraping metal against metal, biting into skin, embedding itself under fingernails. Every scullion is always wet, always smoky, always exhausted. The cook, meanwhile, is one of the most important people in the entire castle. He knows exactly how much grain is left in the granary, how much meat will spoil if not cooked today, which spices are running low, what the Lord expects for supper, how many mouths must be fed, and what the visitors will think if the meal is poor. The cook is, in his own way, a strategist, because food is not simply nourishment. Food is morale. Food is health. Food is politics. So what do people in a castle actually eat? Not what the films show. Not endless feasts of swans and pastries and shimmering towers of meat. 90% of the time, the menu is simple. Grains. Porridge made of barley, wheat, oats, onions, leeks, cabbage, whatever is available, whatever hasn't spoiled. Sometimes there's a bit of meat, and that is a luxury for most. Bread is the foundation of every meal. Dense, dark, often hard enough to serve as a weapon. It is the most important product of the entire estate. And then, of course, there is drink. Clean water is rare and risky. Wells can become contaminated, rainwater can turn foul. So the safest everyday drink is weak, sour ale. So weak that even children drink it, not to celebrate, but to survive. Wine is for the Lord, for guests, or for special occasions. Ale is for everyone else. But on feast days, those rare, sparkling moments, the kitchen becomes a stage. There are whole roasted animals, pies stuffed with meat and fruit, brightly colored dishes dyed with saffron or parsley or beetroot, fish, if the castle has access to rivers or trade routes, cheese, honey, nuts. And then there are the entremets, the theatrical dishes, meant not to feed, but to impress. Things like a roasted peacock returned to its glorious skin and feathers, its beak filled with camphor-soaked cotton so that it appears to breathe fire as servants carry it in. The truth is, the medieval kitchen is both hell and miracle. It is unbearably hot, relentlessly smoky, deafeningly loud. But without it, the castle cannot live. It is here, amid the banging pots, boiling cauldrons, flying sparks, and shouting cooks, that the foundation of the castle's survival is laid every single day. And once you have felt this heat, smelled this smoke, heard this thunderous rhythm, you understand. While the great hall may show the glory of the castle, the kitchen shows its reality. And now, with the taste of smoke still lingering in the air, it is time to step away from the flames and look at what life in the castle truly felt like, for the body, for the senses, and for survival itself. When we hear the word castle, our imagination immediately paints a picture of majestic halls, enormous fireplaces, soft furs on the floor, golden torchlight, and a cozy half-darkness that looks so beautiful on screen. But if you were transported into a real medieval castle for just 1 minute, the first thing you would feel would not be grandeur, not even danger. The first thing that would strike your body, your skin, your bones, would be cold. A cold that lives in the stone. Stone is not a material, it is a predator. It does not store heat, it devours it. You could pile logs into the fireplace, you could sit right next to it, and still your back would remain cold. 2 steps away, and the chill would swallow you whole again. Turn your back on the fire, and a draft would slip under your clothes like a knife. Why? Because medieval fireplaces were terribly inefficient. Most of the heat escaped straight up the chimney, and smoke often poured into the room instead of out of it. Very often the fireplace smoked so badly that an entire hall would fill with a gray, sour fog. Eyes watered, throats burned, the wind changed direction, and you were suddenly standing in a smokehouse. This is why tapestries on the walls were not decorations. They were attempts to make the room at least somewhat warmer. These enormous woven panels did not create luxury. They created the illusion of warmth. Yes, they trapped a bit of heat, but even more importantly, they covered the cracks in the stone walls through which the wind whistled. And yes, they hid the stains of mold and smoke that covered many interiors. Floors were stone, frozen, unyielding. To prevent people's feet from freezing completely, the floors were covered with straw, reeds, or sometimes dried fern. Imagine how it crunches under your feet, how it smells of damp earth, how it collects dirt. This layer absorbed crumbs of food, grease, spilled ale, ashes from the hearth, hair and dust. It was replaced periodically, but far from daily. Sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a year. Yes, twice a year. This floor became a living ecosystem of its own, where mice, beetles, and parasites thrived. They were part of castle life. If you think it was hard to live in a castle because of enemies, you are mistaken. It was hard to live in a castle because of the castle itself. Now, light. Medieval light was not gentle. Torches smoked, oil lamps reeked. Candles made of tallow, that is, animal fat, burned with a sharp, unpleasant smell. Beeswax candles were clean and bright, but so expensive that only the lord's family could afford them regularly. Most of the time, evening in the castle looked like this: dim shadows, wavering smoke, and darkness pressing in from every corner. Even on sunny days, the interiors remained half-lit. Windows were narrow, for defense, not beauty. Glass existed, but it was rare and very expensive. Many windows were simply covered with oiled parchment that let through light, but not clarity. And yet, people lived. They knew how to adapt. They wore wool, fur, several layers of clothing. They slept in heavy blankets behind thick bed curtains that blocked drafts. They huddled close to the fire. They ate hot food whenever possible. Comfort in a castle was relative. For us, it would feel like survival. For them, it was survival, routine, and normality wrapped into one. A medieval castle was grand on the outside and harsh on the inside. It protected, yes, but it did not pamper. If you asked a medieval inhabitant what was the greatest luxury of castle life, they would not say beauty, decor, or grandeur. They would say warmth. A warm corner, a warm bed, a warm drink, a warm moment. And now that we understand what comfort really meant in the Middle Ages, it's time to talk about something even more intimate, something far more shocking to a modern person. Not the cold, not the darkness, but the smells, the dirt, the illnesses, everything that turned even the most luxurious castle into a place where our 21st century noses would collapse within seconds. Next comes what cinema never shows: hygiene, filth, and disease. If you have ever dreamed of spending just one day in the Middle Ages, this is the chapter where most people suddenly think, no, actually, the 21st century feels much more comfortable. Because in a castle, you can endure many things: cold, cramped rooms, hard work, noise. But what a modern person is absolutely not prepared for are the smells. In the Middle Ages, smell was a constant companion of daily life. You couldn't turn it off, you couldn't hide from it, you couldn't defeat it. It was the background, the atmosphere, the environment, and a castle smelled like nothing you have ever experienced. Let's start with the most obvious: the toilets. Films show castles as clean and majestic places, but take just a few steps into the residential areas and the truth becomes clear. Reality was rough. A toilet was a small niche built into the wall called a guardrobe. No door, no ventilation, no privacy, no comfort. Just an opening through which everything fell straight down, into the moat, into a cesspit, or sometimes simply onto the ground beneath the outer wall. In summer, flies swarmed there in thick clouds, and the stench was so overpowering that a modern person would turn back immediately. But for medieval people, this was normal as a sink or shower is for us. Now imagine the inner courtyard, the center of daily life. Horses, dogs, pigs, chickens, all of them were often much closer than you would expect. The courtyard always smelled of manure, wet straw, sweat, and smoke. The kitchen added its own heavy aroma of burning fat and soot. Hearths were fueled with damp logs, which smoked constantly, filling rooms with a hazy fog. People lived inside this mixture of smells without even noticing it. Their noses adapted long ago. Ours would not. But smell wasn't the worst part. The worst part was disease, and it came not from outside the castle, but from within the castle itself. Imagine a closed stone space where dozens of people sleep in one room. The floor is cold stone. Yes, straw is spread over it, but straw gets dirty quickly. It absorbs moisture, begins to rot, and becomes home to insects. Bedding was an ideal breeding ground for lice, fleas, and bedbugs, and they were everywhere. This wasn't a sign of poverty, it was normal. Nobles scratched just as much as servants. A lord could wear a silk shirt and a golden belt, but underneath lived the same parasites. No amount of wealth or titles could save you from them. Diseases spread at terrifying speed. A simple stomach upset could become fatal because dehydration killed quickly. A minor cold could turn into pneumonia. Dirty hands and the absence of proper sanitation made outbreaks common. One unlucky batch of meat, a contaminated bucket of water, a dirty cooking pot, and half the castle could become ill. Medicine was limited to herbs, prayers, and experience. And yet people survived. They learned to live with parasites, with smoke, with filth, with smells so strong they could make a modern visitor faint. They warmed their hands by the fire. They drank hot broth. They lived in a constant state of cold. And still, this was their home. Harsh, uncomfortable, dark, but a home that protected them from enemies, from bandits, from winter storms. And this home survived only because its inhabitants knew how to adapt to conditions that we today would consider absolutely unbearable. And now that you understand what it truly felt like to live in a castle where cold seems to speak to you, where darkness is part of the decor, where smells never leave, where furniture pricks and floors rot, where comfort is a luxury and survival a daily mission, now it is time to talk about the second layer of medieval reality. What happened when your body had to fight back? Because hygiene, disease, toilets, and parasites tell us more about the Middle Ages than any chronicle ever could. In the solar, within the lady's private chambers, the morning begins in silence, deceptively soft and peaceful. Yet it is here that one of the most paradoxical stories of the Middle Ages unfolds, the story of beauty that kills. We tend to imagine the lives of the nobility as luxurious, comfortable, protected from the hardships that tormented ordinary people. But if a peasant's main enemies were cold, disease, and hard labor, then for a noblewoman, the enemy could be something far more insidious: fashion. The beauty standards of the 13th, 14th centuries were brutal. A woman was expected to be tall, with a small chest, slender arms, and, most importantly, an utterly pale complexion. Pale skin signified high status. A tan meant laboring in the fields, and therefore low birth. To achieve the ideal porcelain look, the lady used one of the most dangerous cosmetic mixtures in history, Venetian ceruse, a blend of vinegar and lead. She applied it to her face, neck, and décolleté. At first glance, the effect was enchanting, a soft glow, a whiteness rarely found in nature. But beneath that glow, poisoning began. Lead seeped into the blood. Month after month, it destroyed the skin, causing ulcers and inflammation. Teeth decayed and fell out. Hair thinned. The nervous system suffered. Speech faltered. Pain and convulsions appeared, sometimes even symptoms we would now recognize as psychological. Worst of all, as the lady's skin deteriorated, as spots and sores appeared, she simply applied more ceruse to hide the damage. And so the cycle continued. For years. Cosmetics, however, were not her only ordeal. Look at medieval portraits of women. Almost all of them have unusually high foreheads. This was not a natural feature. It was fashion. The hairline was plucked or burned back with special ointments, sometimes containing quicklime or arsenic. Eyebrows were plucked almost entirely. The higher, cleaner, more elevated the forehead was, the more noble the woman was considered. Medieval beauty was not about softness. It was about control, discipline, endurance, and often pain. But behind this pain lay a completely different side of the lady, one rarely discussed. The lady was not only the mistress of the castle, the keeper of the keys, she was its chief healer. A university-trained physician cost a fortune and could be several days' journey away. So the health of the garrison, the servants, the children, and even the Lord himself rested on the lady's shoulders. She had a still room, a small distillation chamber where she prepared oils, tinctures, herbal infusions, salves, and syrups. She knew that willow bark eased pain, that honey helped wounds heal, that sage soothed the throat, and mint relieved breathing. Bundles of herbs hung on her windowsill, jars of extracts filled her cupboards, bottles of powders lined her shelves. She was the alchemist of her household. Diagnosis itself often relied on practices that seem unbelievable today. Uroscopy. The primary diagnostic tool was a glass vessel filled with the patient's urine. The lady, or the castle's healer, examined its color, smell, and sediment. Sometimes, yes, she tasted it. This is how diabetes was detected. Sweet urine indicated the sugar sickness. For the Middle Ages, this was advanced medical science. And the paradox is that many witch-like practices, herbs, tinctures, poultices, saved far more lives than the official medicine of that era. It is important to dispel another myth. No, women who healed with herbs were not automatically burned as witches. Inside the castle, her work was essential and respected. The church frowned at times, but did not forbid it, so long as healing was accompanied by Christian prayer and did not substitute religious rites. The lady was no witch. She was a doctor, pharmacist, cosmetologist, chemist, and at times a psychologist. The health and survival of dozens of people depended on her. And it is in this delicate balance between a deadly fashion demanding beauty at any cost and the practical daily medicine that required knowledge and responsibility that the true nature of the lady emerges. She lived in a world where danger stalked everyone, yet she was expected to be stronger than all. Her morning began with cosmetics that slowly poisoned her body, but continued with caring for those who relied on her. The medieval lady was someone who lived simultaneously in a world of luxury and in a world of raw survival. She is a symbol of how complex and contradictory the lives of people in a medieval castle truly were. And when we speak of the lady of the castle, a woman who managed the estate, healed the sick, kept the accounts, and at the same time slowly poisoned herself with her own cosmetics, we must remember something else. In the Middle Ages, power was always visible. It had to be displayed. And the primary way to demonstrate wealth, authority, order, and generosity was the feast. The lady planned it, controlled the supplies, supervised the kitchen staff, checked the quality of the ale and wine, selected the dishes, and welcomed the guests. A feast was not just an examination for the cooks. It was an examination for her. It was the stage on which the entire castle declared to the world, "We have strength, we have resources, we have order." Therefore, to truly understand the life of a medieval castle, we must now step into the place where that power became material, the great hall, the feast table, where food turned into spectacle, and every piece of bread was a part of politics. If the kitchen is the stomach of the castle, then the feast is its stage. And this stage is not about nourishment. It is a demonstration of strength, generosity, status, political influence, and a reminder of who rules here. A feast in a medieval castle is not a meal. It is a performance in which every gesture, every piece of bread, every sound of a trumpet carries meaning. The feast does not begin with the serving of dishes, but with a ritual of cleanliness. A servant approaches you, holding an aquamanal, a pitcher shaped like a lion or a dragon. He tilts it, and water pours over your hands. You wash not because it is a refined custom, but because there are no forks. In the 13th century, the fork is a suspicious object, the devil's tool, an extravagant Byzantine affectation, something that provokes either laughter or disdain. Your primary utensils are your own fingers and the personal knife you brought with you. The knife is your companion, your passport, your only dining tool. Without it, you simply cannot eat. Food is served not chaotically, but in courses, carefully choreographed acts of a grand theatrical production. The first course is light, meant to open the stomach. Spiced broths, green peas with saffron, blancmange, not a dessert as today, but a white chicken porridge made with almond milk, rice flour, and sugar, delicate and airy yet expensive. It is a statement of the household's wealth. Then comes the second course, the heavy artillery. Roasted venison, wild boar, and sometimes swans are brought to the table. Birds are often served with their heads gilded to emphasize the lord's status. This is where the entremets appear, the entertainment dishes historians love to mention. This is culinary theater in its purest form. Imagine, a peacock is carried into the hall, but not just a peacock whose skin was removed before cooking, then carefully placed back over the roasted meat. Its tail is fanned out, gold glitters on its beak from the torchlight, flames burst from its mouth, a wad of camphor-soaked cotton has been placed inside. No words are needed. One look tells you everything. This is a feast of the wealthy, a feast of the powerful. And the funniest part? Peacock meat tastes terrible, tough, dry, fibrous, but no one cares. This is food meant to be seen. Behind all this splendor lies a detail movies almost never show. None of the guests has a plate in the modern sense. Instead, there is a trencher, a thick, stale, rock-hard slab of bread baked 4 days earlier specifically to be used as a plate. Meat is placed on it. Sauces pour onto it. The trencher absorbs juices and fat, but a respectable person would never eat it. The bread is a tool. After the meal, it is thrown into a basket and given to the poor at the castle gates, or fed to the dogs. Medieval charity smells of hot grease and scorched bread. You drink wine, but wine is almost always diluted with water. Drinking it undiluted signals a lack of restraint or manners. Wine is not for intoxication, it is for taste, ritual, and status. Beer is for quenching thirst, and it is consumed in large quantities. But be careful, while there is no communal cup, it is often passed around. This is a gesture of trust, and at the same time, a test. You drink from the same vessel as the person beside you, someone who may very well be your political rival. A feast is a diplomatic battlefield, not a dining room. And all of this takes place in a cacophony of sound. Voices roar, lutes play, trumpets blare, fire crackles in the hearth, servants shout, benches creak. A feast in the castle is neither quiet nor restrained. It is a celebration of power, a declaration, we can afford this. People are not simply eating, they are showing who they are and what their place is. But there is one crucial nuance. Beneath the magnificence lies a rigid hierarchy. You cannot sit wherever you want. Your seat at the table is your social rank. The closer you are to the Lord, the higher your status. Everyone knows whom they may interrupt and whom they must never interrupt. Who is served first? Who receives the finest cut of meat? Who is allowed to drink from the Lord's cup? A feast is a performance of authority in which the Lord is the director, the guests are the actors, and the dishes are the scenery. Meanwhile, the servants work without pause. They carry heavy cauldrons, refill cups, feed the fire, pull bones from underfoot for the Lord's dog, quickly wipe spills. They are the invisible spirits of this theater, and they know that a mistake is not merely embarrassing, it is a disgrace to the castle, or a punishment. So every step they take is precise, swift, and almost invisible. And then, when the final course is finished and the music begins to fade, the feast slowly transforms into something else, a space for discussions, schemes, conversations, promises, deals, and rumors. A feast is not leisure, it is work, it is politics. It is a social ritual in which you show who you are and what you are worth. And yet, when you leave the great hall, your ears still ring with the noise of celebration. Your clothes smell of smoke and roasted meat. Your fingers are sticky with sauce. The bread trencher lies in a basket for the poor. Music still echoes somewhere in your mind, and you feel what people of the Middle Ages felt. The feast is not just food. It is the moment when the castle reveals another side of itself, as a center of power, wealth, culture, and authority. And now, having witnessed the feast as a living performance, we can move on to what happens after it. For it is after the feasting that the Lord transforms the great hall into a place where destinies are decided, into a courtroom. When we speak of a castle, we often imagine war, feasts, or knights. But there is one part of castle life without which the Middle Ages cannot be understood at all: the court. Not a royal court, not a state institution, but a local, private court, where the law is not universal, but belongs to a single man. The manorial court was the heart of medieval power. This was the place where the fate of everyone was decided, from wealthy land tenants to the poorest peasants, from an innkeeper to a widow, from a fisherman to a craftsman. If you lived on the Lord's land, He was your law, not an abstract state, not a code of rules, not a parliament. One living figure, the Lord, or His lady. The morning of the court begins early. Benches are brought into the great hall, the center of the room is cleared, and servants wipe down the table where the Lord will hear cases. When we step into the hall, it is nothing like it was during the feast. No musicians, no laughter, no aroma of spices. It smells of cold smoke, woolen clothing, and damp wood. People speak much more quietly than usual. Court is a public matter, and a dangerous one. Because here, everyone answers for their actions, and sometimes for someone else's. The Lord takes His place at the head of the hall. Beside Him may stand His steward, a clerk, or a priest. The Lord's task is not to search for philosophical truth, but to maintain order and protect the manor's income. That is why the court most often deals not with murder or serious crimes, such cases go to the royal court, but with everyday disputes. Who ruined a neighbor's field? Who failed to pay rent? Who beat his wife? Who stole a sack of grain? Who let livestock onto the communal meadow? Who sold spoiled ale? Yes, bad ale was one of the most common cases. The ale conner, the official ale taster, may report that the local alewife diluted her drink with water or that it has soured. Ale in the Middle Ages was a staple food. Everyone drank it: men, women, children. Bad ale was a danger to health, a violation of economic order, and a direct hit to the Lord's income. Fines could be heavy, and the Lord loved such cases. Fines meant money, and money meant the ability to maintain a garrison, buy grain, hold feasts, and build fortifications. In many ways, the manorial court was accounting disguised as justice. But there were more serious matters as well. Poaching. The forest was the Lord's property, the deer, the Lord's property. To take a deer meant to steal His money, his food, his symbol of authority. Punishments varied: fines, the pillory, sometimes corporal punishment, but rarely mutilation. A castle needed working hands. Killing or maiming people was bad economics. Sometimes the court dealt with public disturbances, quarrels between neighbors, brawls in taverns, damage to tools, insults to the steward. In the Middle Ages, order was not a moral idea. Order was an economic one. Disorder threatened the entire system of survival. And now the most important part. Films often show castle dungeons where prisoners rot in chains. In reality, prisons were a luxury few could afford. Prisoners had to be fed, and feeding them cost money. So castle dungeons were almost never used as long-term imprisonment. They held only two kinds of people: dangerous offenders for a short time before judgment or execution, and VIP hostages. Yes, nobles captured in war might live in the dungeon with better food than some servants upstairs. They received wine, decent meals, sometimes even a personal attendant. Why? Because they were worth money. Noble prisoners were walking treasure chests. Their ransom could fund the castle for a year. The manorial court was attended by the entire village. Everyone watched the Lord. Everyone understood. Today, they judge your neighbor. Tomorrow, they might judge you. The court served one essential function: social discipline. It showed that power lived here, in this hall, in the hands of one man. And when the cases are reviewed, the fines recorded, and the guilty punished, the Lord rises. The hall gradually returns to everyday life: eating, working, children running about, servants shouting, torches smoking. But now everyone leaves with a double feeling. On one hand, justice has been restored. On the other, a reminder: in this world, order exists because people fear and respect authority, because power is personal, because the law is not paper, it is a man. And most importantly, through the manorial court, we see the castle not only as a weapon, not only as a home, but as an administrative center, a political engine that manages the life of an entire community. And now, having seen the castle's power in peaceful times, we must move to the moment when peace collapses, when the courts fall silent, the feasts end, and the castle stops being a household and once again becomes what it was built to be: a fortress. When the horizon darkens and a sentinel on the tower cries out a single word that makes everyone's stomach clench: enemies, the castle ceases to be a home. All the bread smells, the lute music, the candle-lit letters in the lady's solar, the noise of children, the everyday life vanish in an instant. The castle becomes what it was designed to be from the very beginning: a machine of death. The first thing that happens is lockdown. All gates, except one, the smallest, most fortified postern gate, are sealed. Servants drop their buckets and run inside. Merchants caught in the courtyard may be trapped there for the entire siege. The drawbridge groans as it rises. The portcullis slams down with a metallic crash so heavy that the stones vibrate. The barbican, the outer defensive fort, becomes the first trap. In peaceful times, it is just part of the architecture. In war, it turns into a killing corridor where attackers are caught under crossfire from three sides. The garrison appears on the walls. These are no longer the people you saw in the morning, not sleepy guards, not servants with water pails, not knights with wooden practice swords. No, now they are defenders. Everyone takes their position as if they've rehearsed it 100 times, because they have. Every person in the castle knows exactly where to stand when the alarm sounds. The Lord disappears inside the keep to make decisions that will determine everyone's fate. In peacetime, he was a judge, a diplomat, a host. Now he is a commander. He decides how many men to send to the walls, how many to keep at the gates, how many to assign to boiling water and gathering ammunition. He sends a messenger to discover, whose army is this? Has it come for him, for a neighbor, for everyone? Meanwhile, on the parapet, life becomes preparation for the death of others, and possibly one's own. Films love to show boiling oil, but that is a beautiful myth. No one in the Middle Ages would waste valuable food like that. Oil was far too precious. What actually rained down on attackers was boiling water, or boiling animal fat, pitch, or hot sand. Fat and pitch stick to the body and armor, causing horrific burns. Hot sand seeps into armor gaps and burns the flesh beneath. Stones are stacked near the battlements, ready to be hurled down. Spears and arrows are prepared for the first assault. Archers check their bowstrings and grease them so the damp air doesn't weaken the fibers. Catapults, if the castle has any, are wound tight, loaded with stone shot. Down below, in the courtyard, enormous cauldrons boil, not for food, but for defense. But the striking change is in the air itself. Yesterday, it was filled with kitchen smoke, the smell of baking bread, shouts of children. Now it is thick with tension, the scent of hot fat and burning pitch, the metallic tang of fear. Fear felt by everyone, but spoken by no one. Each person in the castle has a role, and the castle, which hours ago was a home, is now a living organism in battle mode. Every stairway turn, every jutting stone, every tiny balcony with arrow slits becomes part of the trap. The castle shows its true nature, merciless, cunning, relentless. It was not built for feasts or tapestries or romantic legends. It was built for this, for war. And while the enemy forms ranks at the base of the hill, while spears glint in the sun, while the sound of drums grows louder, the castle holds its breath, not in fear, but in readiness. It knows what to do. It has done this many times. It stands here not to be beautiful. It stands to fight. And now we will see what happens when the enemy does not retreat, when the army reaches the walls, when the one event feared by every inhabitant begins: the siege. When a siege begins, the castle stops being a home entirely. Everything that once reminded people of daily life, the laughter of children, the smell of bread from the kitchen, the noise of the stables, the cooks shouting, disappears. The castle becomes a capsule, a sealed vessel cut off from the world. No one can leave. No one can bring in supplies. No help can be summoned. You exist inside a stone cocoon, together with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, and every one of them is another mouth to feed. This is why most castles did not fall to battering rams, mines, or assaults. They fell to hunger. The first days of a siege are always the same. People are still confident. They still hope for quick relief. They stand on the walls, looking down at the enemy camps, trying to guess when a friendly army might arrive. The guards stand straighter. The knights talk louder. The Lord behaves calmly. But after several weeks pass, the castle begins to understand the truth. It is alone, completely alone. Supplies are rationed with absolute strictness. Flour, meat, salted pork, beans, barley, everything is recorded, counted, locked away. Food is distributed in smaller and smaller portions. First normal, then reduced again and again. The ration shrinks a little every day. Fresh food disappears first, then meat, then poultry, then the horses. A horse is not just an animal, it is a weapon. It is part of a knight. But during a siege, a horse becomes meat. After the horses come the dogs, then the rats. People know they are eating the last things they have, and fear becomes everyone's constant companion. Water is an even greater fear. A poisoned well means the end. So water is always boiled. It is drunk sparingly. Even children receive only the smallest measure. Discipline becomes a religion. Breaking ration rules means death. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. In a siege, anyone who eats or drinks more than their share kills everyone else. Yet even this is not the worst. The true horror begins when the first dead appear. Disease spreads quickly. Constant damp, dirt, overcrowding, weakened bodies. These conditions are perfect for epidemics. The Lord makes a decision that seems barbaric to us, but in the Middle Ages was considered strategic. Bodies of the dead are thrown outside, sometimes simply over the wall, sometimes hurled by catapult back into the enemy camp. It is both an act of despair and an attempt at psychological warfare, a real chance to infect the attackers. But the defenders also use deception. When food is nearly gone, when only a few bags remain in the granaries, when the kitchen is nearly empty, the Lord may order something that seems insane. Throw a bag of grain or a slaughtered pig over the wall. It is a performance, a final attempt to trick the enemy into thinking the defenders still have plenty, that the siege will last too long, that better sense dictates retreat. The nights of a siege are a torment of their own. People cannot sleep. The stairways feel longer. The stone walls no longer feel like protection. They press inward like a suffocating dome. Every noise sparks dread. Is it digging? An assault? Saboteurs? Voices sharpen. People begin to watch each other with suspicion. Arguments erupt. The Lord and the guards suppress conflict quickly and brutally, not because they are vicious, but because in a confined space, human panic spreads faster than any disease. Whispers begin. We should surrender. Help isn't coming. The enemy promised mercy. These are the most dangerous words, because if a castle surrenders before the wall is breached, there is a chance, however small, a chance for the garrison to live, a chance to walk away with weapons, a chance to start again. But if the enemy has opened a breach, all rules disappear. A castle that resisted after the breach is considered defiant, and the fate of everyone, from the Lord to the lowest maid, is sealed. Sometimes the Lord orders the execution of those who advocate surrender too early. This seems cruel, but in medieval logic it is an act of preservation. One frightened person can break the resolve of 100. And then the moment arrives, the one everyone fears, the day the bread is gone, the day there is no more stew in the pot, the day when a new ration cannot be issued because there is nothing left to give. The castle reaches the brink. Beyond it lies only death or capitulation. If no help has come, if the walls tremble under the blows of the battering ram, if the breach widens, the Lord raises the white flag. This is not an act of weakness. It is an act of wisdom. He understands he must save those who remain. But even then, no one knows what the victor will decide. The castle surrenders to the mercy of the enemy, and mercy could take many forms. Sometimes the defenders were allowed to leave. Sometimes they were taken prisoner. Sometimes they were all put to the sword. A castle that survived a siege was a half-dead organism. The survivors walked out of its gates looking like people who had passed through another world, gaunt, overgrown, filthy, with faces aged in a matter of weeks. A siege reveals the truth. A castle is not its walls. A castle is its people, their fears, their hopes, their endurance. If the walls fall but the people live, the castle can be rebuilt. But if the people break, the stone no longer matters at all. When a siege ended, when weapons were laid down, when the enemy withdrew, or when the castle surrendered to the victor's mercy, it might seem as though everything finally fell silent. But that is an illusion. A castle never truly fell silent. Even in the stillness after battle, it continued to live. It was not just a place where people ate, worked, slept, and waited for news. It was an entire universe in which a person lived out their whole journey, from birth to death. For a medieval person, a castle meant safety. Not comfort, not luxury, not romance. Safety. In a world where epidemics wiped out villages, where raids could happen on any night, where the law depended on whoever held the sword, the castle was the only place where you could feel even half protected. Here, the walls shielded you from arrows. Here, the stores were kept that would carry you through the winter. Here, disputes were settled. Here, you could find work, food, and a roof over your head. The castle was the center of power, the center of administration, the center of order, and that is why it was a symbol of hope. Perhaps harsh, perhaps grim, but hope nonetheless. Yet the castle was also another symbol, a symbol of fear. Behind its walls, it was easier to survive, but harder to breathe freely. Everything here was controlled: work, behavior, discipline, words, relationships. Everyone knew their place. A castle could feed you, and it could punish you. It could protect you, and it could take everything away. For those who lived inside, it was both a home and a cage. And still, despite the cold, the dirt, the disease, the hard labor, and the constant threat of war, people continued living in castles for centuries. They continued building new ones. They continued reinforcing the old ones. Because the castle told them one simple thing: you are not alone. Here, you will be protected. In a world full of dangers, that meant everything. Today we look at castles differently. We see ruins, walls, towers, picturesque landscapes. We see a romance that the Middle Ages never had. But the next time you find yourself standing before a real castle, try imagining not how it looks, but how it sounded. The cry of the watchman at dawn, the creak of carts, the thud of an iron against iron, shouts from the kitchen, the smell of smoke, the clatter of cups in the great hall, the whisper of prayers during a siege, the silence after surrender. That is the breath of the real Middle Ages. A castle is not its walls. A castle is its people, their labor, their fears, their hopes. A castle is a memory of a time when every day was a struggle for survival. And if today we managed even for a moment to transport ourselves there, then these stones are still fulfilling their main purpose, to remind us that human history was built not on luxury, but on endurance, resilience, and courage. And so, as we leave, we carry with us not only knowledge about how medieval people lived, but an understanding. Behind every stone wall, there are always human lives, and they are what truly make a castle alive. Thank you so much for watching our video and supporting the channel. See you in the next episodes, and good night.